Почитуван председател на Владата на Република Северна Македонија, господин Димитар Ковачевски, почитуван прв заменик на председателот на Владата Устинартан Груби, почитувани вице-премиери, министри, почитувани представници на дипломатскиот кор, почитувани представници на општествениот и стопанскиот живот нашата земја, почитувани представници на граѓанските организации, почитувани представници на медиумите, почитувани граѓани на Република Северна Македонија. Добар ден и добродојдов на денешниот форум по повод 100 дена од мандатот на Владата на Република Северна Македонија. Индерували кретари Кеверис Република Македонија.
Почитуван председател на Влада на Република Северна Македонија Ковачевски, прв вице-премиер на Владата господин Артан Групи, министри на Владата на Северна Република Македонија, на дипломатскиот хор, професори на општествениот и економски живот, на медиумите, граѓанските организации, почитувани, благодариме на вашето присуство по повод 100 дена на мандатот на Владата на Северна Република Македонија.
Како врвни принципи на ова влада, форумот има за цел да бидат презентирани и да се стават на дискусија постигнувањата на владата и министерствата во изминативе 100 дена. Денешниот форум ќе се одвива во 3 дела, односно 3 панел сесии по принципот прашања и одговори. Во првиот дел, односно во првата сесија, со своје обраќање, председателот на Владата на Република Северна Македонија, господин Димитар Ковачевски, ќе ги сублимира најважните остварувања во првите 100 дена во актуелниот домашен и меѓународен политички контекст. Потоа ќе следува прашање и одговори со премиерот Ковачевски. Прашањата поврзани со активностите на Владата во изминативе 100 дена можете да ги адресирате до премиерот, вице-премиерите и министрите. Премиерот Ковачевски по неговото експозе ќе одговори на прашањата што беа упатени до него. Во втората и трета сесија по принципот прашање и одговори, остварувањата во првите 100 дена и реализацијата на приоритетите ќе ги презентират вице-премиерите и министрите. Почитувани, го поканувам председателот на Владата, Димитар Ковачевски, да ви се обрати.
Почитувани дами и господа, почитувани екселенции, почитувани председатели на стопански комори, почитувани представници на граѓанските организации, почитувани представници на медиумите, почитувани членови на владата, почитувани граѓани. Ви благодарам за присуството на денешниот форум по повод 100 дена работа на оваа влада, која имам чест, но и голема одговорност да ја предводам во услови на најголема глобална криза која паметиме во новата историја. Деновиве читав коментари дека оваа влада немала среќа, бидејќи од прв ден се соочила со огромни предизвици, воена и економска криза, како што не се памети. Точно е дека предизвиците, притисокот и очекувањата се големи, но среќа е што токму оваа влада ја има одговорноста да се носи со сите овие предизвици. Среќа е затоа што одговорно тврдам дека за 100 дена донесовме тешки, принципиелни и пред се државнички одлуки со кои ги штитиме граѓаните, нивниот стандард и нивните приходи. И затоа, пред да продолжам со излагањето, сакам да им се заблагодарам на сите мои колеги од владата, сите советници и целиот тим кој неуморно работеше во овие 100 дена. Докажавме дека со добар менеджмент, одговорно управување, со парите на граѓаните и честна работа може да се надминат и најтешките предизвици. Во моето кратко поведно излагање ќе ставам фокус на клучните мерки кои владата ги презеде за уплажување на последиците од енергетската криза, како и на приоритетите и мерките кои ги преземаме на среден и долг рок за економски развој на земјата. Првиот приоритет се однесува на заштитата на животниот стандард на оние кои се најранливи и задржување на ликвидноста на компаниите. Вториот се однесува на одржлив економски раст, односно продолжување на програмите за раст на производството, на извозот, како и на стопанската активност во земјата. Третиот приоритет се фокусира на зголемување на бруто инвестициите, и тоа на инвестициите кои се доминантно од државниот буџет, меѓутоа и на приватните инвестиции, како генератор на економскиот раст на државата на среден рок. Со 26 антикризни мерки го спречивме ударот од големиот ценовен шок во услови на историски највисока цена на храна и на енергенси. Со намалување на данокот на додадена вредност и акцизите имаме најниска цена на нафта и нафтени деривати во регионот. Со намалување на данокот на додадена вредност од 5% на 0 и со ограничување на малопродажните и големо продажните маржи на основните прехранбени производи, успеавме да спречиме огромен раст на цените и да го заштитиме стандардот на граѓаните. Го ублаживме големото поскапување на храната и енергенсите, а со антикризните мерки кои ги воведовме, граѓаните месечно заседуваат по 300 денари на нафта, по 1500 денари за храна и по 2150 денари за сметка за струја. Ефектите од овие мерки значат заштеда од скоро 4000 денари месечно за секој граѓанин. Карактеристика на оваа влада е ефикасно, честно и одговорно владење и работа, а тоа се гледа и во стабилниот буџет. И во услови на пандемија, а сега и во услови на најголема енергетска криза, нема застој во исплата на плати, пензии, приватниот сектор и најпогодените гранки се финансиски поддржани, а паралелно креираме крупни, долгорочни планови од кои бенефит ќе имаат сегашните и идните генерации. Уште во првите 50 дена, оваа влада направи два историски чекори. Низ економско-социјален диалог ја покачивме минималната плата на 18.000 денари и овозможивме рекордно покачување на пензиите, вклучувајќи и дополнителна финансиска поддршка за пензионерите. Со сите преземени активности во 2022 година, на годишно ниво, заедно со директната финансиска помош, во просек пензионерите ќе имаат околу 12.000 денари плюс во домашниот буџет. Почитувани гости, оваа криза не научи дека мора да се работи и инвестира стратешки. Во овие услови на раст на цени на храна и енергенси, спроведуваме успешна енергетска транзиција и одржливо земјоделско производство. Според стратегијата за енергетска транзиција, ние веќе имаме јасна слика каде ќе се движи нашето производство на електрична енергија. Неодамна ја пуштивме првата фотоволтаична централа на старите наоѓалишта на јаглен во Осломен, 10 мегавати, како државна инвестиција помогната од Европската банка за обнова и развој. Новата фотонапонска електрана Осломен ќе произведува чиста домашна енергија и ќе придонесе кон заштита на животната средина. Со оваа електрана, освен што ќе ги снабдиме потребите на околу 2800 домаќинства со електрична енергија, правиме и рекултивација и оплеменување на 15 хектари површина. Ова е прв проект со кој се заменува производството на електрична енергија од загадувачка технологија со чиста технологија и како таков е пример за идните проекти
clean energy and thus provides future projects for energy transition in the countries of the Western Balkans. Then our Chebron hydropower plant is in its second phase and we need to identify the contractor. A new intervention plan was also developed that includes investment in wheat, corn, oat and sunflower. In terms of subsidies, we introduced a number of novelties. For the first time ever, we introduced advanced amounts for subsidies, starting with orchards, and subsidies will be paid 30% prior to the initiation of the season when our farmers need most funds to be able to invest, and 70% after at the end of the plan. Number two, subsidies for planting wheat, corn and sunflower will be supported at the highest level possible. then we are encouraging them to invest to our common benefit. For the economy, of special importance in the implementation of capital investment. Last year, we implemented 79% of our capital investment, and we are following the same pace this year. Then a captive mechanism was introduced for better realization of capital investment. We decided to set up a specialized government body, a unit for monitoring infrastructural projects by coordinating all project units for timely detection and handling of all current and potential challenges we are facing in the utilization of the capital investment budget, as well as the central budget and the other institutions' budgets under whose responsibility lies the construction of major infrastructural projects, better quality roads, water pipelines, schools, kindergartens, sewerage stations, then purification stations, dams, irrigation facilities, and many other capital projects that will be timely projected and implemented. In the past 100 days, the coordination of all stakeholders has secured the stability of the economic system, and the Macedonian tenor, in spite of all the turbulences in the European and worldwide economy, has remained stable. We have introduced protective mechanisms in the financial system, which enables its unimpeded functioning, and the foreign currency supplies provide stable economy operation. The government is a partner of business community, and through joint consultations, the customs tariff rates were actually accommodated to be reduced of 258 customs designations, thus meeting the needs of companies to reduce customs tariffs as well as harmonize such tariffs with the tariffs of the EU, which is of special importance for the promotion of competitiveness and exports of the Macedonian economy. In addition, from the anti-crisis measures package, the authorization of non-interest lines for 3 credit lines for the development and support of the private sector will provide support of the economy and liquidity of our companies. Here, I wish to wrap up my introductory speech and point out that this government remains dedicated to the key issues of interest to our citizens. Among them, special attention will be paid to the economic stability and better living standards will be given, and our focus is put on the economic development of the country and financial support of the families. Also, this government will remain to be efficient, responsible, honored, and highly productive in its operation, following its high goals that we will accomplish through hard work. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prime Minister. I hereby invite you to continue with our session. In the interest of time, in order to maintain a greater efficiency, the questions we received I think now we are okay. We're starting. Recently, a great deal of investment has been put into the development of new capacities. We are continuing with the first session of Q&A for Prime Minister. In the recent times, we have intensified the investment in a new capacities for the production of green energy, electrical energy. You mentioned that there's a solar panel. Currently, there are investments that are put in. Does this mean that we will, to maximum use all the capacities and what is the dynamic of the next. Thank you very much for your question. This question is, we are not only preoccupied in our government, but it is one of the key important issues in the European Union, including the countries that are expecting to become fully fledged members of the EU. Last year, there was an energy crisis which began. Furthermore, we experienced the energy crisis as a consequence of the military intervention in Ukraine. The governments had to undertake measures which will curb down the price shock. This also caused another topic, and it refers to the diversification and supply of the energy. Our country adopted a strategy which basically means a transition from the current production of electricity, which is dominantly produced by using coal in Oslomy, transition of a renewable energy. For this purpose, as I've said in my address, we commissioned a trial operation of the solar panel. We have signed agreements with a public and private partnership with a company from Turkey for us. The project is in its own final phases, another 50 megawatts on the same basis. For additional, we have SMA, the state-run company, will be building another facility for we will have 120 megawatts of clean energy instead of the 120 megawatts which we are currently using from Oslomy power plant. Also, we are preparing a project of 200 megawatts which will be funded by our multilateral investors. This is going to be implemented by the Ministry of Economy. We have agreed on 120 megabytes of electricity. We also have additional strategic investors, which are leading companies in the domain of energy. VPD from Germany. They have expressed the interest to invest in our country as strategic investors. The investments that they are planning is wind production energy, and it is going to be producing over 1 gigabyte electricity. We will also have a replacing of the production of energy derived from coal. Once again, I'd like to mention the historical moment which has been announced by all the governments, and they are at the first stage. This government is in a second phase of its implementation. We have 9 companies offering their services, reputable companies, and they do have equal opportunities. They have seen the field or the terrain. I'm referring to the diversifiable power point, which will, if realized, will help us obtain additional energy from the sun and from the wind. From Elbasan to Bitola, we connected. We have high power, so we are connected with Albanian electricity grid, and we will be able to transport the energy from its territory to Serbia, Bulgaria, Kosovo, and Albania. And we will be able to build additional capacities and sell the excess energy to the countries that are not sufficient with electricity. We have all the questions. In the world is currently facing the economic and health crisis in the recent history. There's a threat of a lack of food. The government intervened with a set of measures to soften the shock. And we have done all the steps. Do we have a strategy which in the long term will enable us to produce domestically? This is the second question, which is very of key importance. The crisis, according to the history of the economic science, this crisis is one of the biggest crises after the World War II, which has affected Europe. This result is a result of the military intervention of Russia against Ukraine. We have a sudden increase in the price of energy, the greatest increase of food, the greatest increase of the artificial. We also have increase in other processing industry. There's a disruption of the offer and supply, and this is why we are in the midst of an economic crisis when it comes to the supply economic crisis, which causes inflation. And when we look at the figures, they are practically very identical with all the other European countries and with the countries that are outside of European Union. In our country, we had a wrong concept of subsidies, which was introduced predominantly to fund the agriculture and the funding of other political goals. When we look at the figures, 8 to 9 billion dinars annually, we realize that we have a less production of food and a greater import of food. For this purpose, we have prepared an interventional plan which is geared up towards the strategies like corn and export produce from the orchards, and we have increased the level of subsidies to the animal husbandry, especially when it comes to the production of milk. When we look at the capacities in the country, we realize that we are not able to produce more than 50% of our needs. Therefore, we introduced and input in new subsidies with the new program. And when it comes to the strategic cultures in the orchards and animal husbandries, and in addition for the production of the strategic culture, I'm referring to the wheat and to the corn, additional 6,000 hectares state-owned land has been made available and to be divided to the farmers, which will contribute towards a greater production. All this we have undertaken as the first steps in order to increase the food production, because the Republic of North Macedonia has also a good climate, very hard-working people, and a good amount of land. We are continuing with our third topic, Q&A, our integration of our country into the European Union and the integrations of North Macedonia and Albania into the European Union. What are our chances? Before I go any further, let me talk. This is because our people knows well. They know well that the European Union it represents a union of different countries and states which cherish three basic fundamental values: the freedom of expression and the right to have a critical opinion, social justice, we as a country during the past 30 years, the institutions and its citizens have made enormous efforts, and we have given up a lot in order to meet the criteria to become a member of the European Union. That this is the right way. It has been confirmed by the reports, 4 reports. It is important, the continual support that we are receiving from Germany, from France, United States of America, and the European Union. But our membership from the days when we started our intergovernmental, unfortunately we have a challenge because of the veto placed by our neighboring country from the previous government concerning the Republic of North Macedonia. We commenced a dialogue of discussion with the Bulgarian government. All entire public is aware, and there are working groups that are working on specific topics towards improving the day-to-day living of citizens. We are doing this on the basis of the success that will be achieved as a result of the discussions. This can be only done on the basis of a discussion which will be based on the European values and the principles of a mutual respect between the institutions and the citizens, and the principles of dignity, where the two parties will have to maintain and keep the dignity of their respective citizens. And this is the only way which will produce a positive dialogue and will provide an outcome which will serve as a base of the future excellent relationship between the neighboring countries, which will be moving forward into the European. Unfortunately, these discussions can be hijacked by the nationalists and the populists, and this is not a good thing. But we, as respective governments that are oriented European way, we need to impose a narrative which will be positive, which will aim to the future, and which will also facilitate the commencement of negotiations of a Republic of Macedonia with the European Union. I will repeat that this narrative must be based on the mutual respect and discussion that is filled with the dignity. Thank you, Prime Minister. We closed the first session with the Prime Minister Kovačevski. We will be continuing with the second session at today's forum, where the Vice Prime Ministers will be responding to the questions that have been sent to the emails. Sonia Jankovska will be addressing. Thank you, Prime Minister. Hoxha said at the beginning, this consists of 3 panels. which will be answering questions to the questions which we received, and the Deputy Prime Ministers will be responding according to their competencies, and they will be talking about the priorities that were set by the government for the first 100 days, including the challenges which were faced before the government and before the citizens. Within the competencies of the Deputy Prime Ministers are exclusively important topics, the relationship between the communities, the rule of law, and the European integration. I will invite them to continue, the respective Prime Ministers, to join us on the second session.
Okay, we may get started with the first Deputy Prime Minister in the government responsible for the political system and interethnic relations, Mr. Artan Grubi. Up until now, we could hear the responses of the Prime Minister, where the measures were presented that were undertaken in the past 100 days. What would you single out as an accomplishment within these 100 days of the mandate of the new government? Thank you very much. Good day to you all. I suppose you can hear me. No? Good day to you all. Thank you very much for responding to the invitation by the government to meet together today, especially the government members, the Prime Minister and the Deputy Prime Ministers, dear ambassadors, dear representatives of the civil society organizations, directors, deputy directors, journalists, citizens, thank you very much for being present. I suppose you will need headphones to be able to understand, because I'll be speaking Albanian. So I would like to ask you to put on your headphones to be able to follow the presentation. Thank you. Dear Prime Minister, dear ministers, ambassadors, civil society, journalists, dear citizens, for me, the leitmotif of the first 100 days of this government is the stability. In difficult times for our country and the region, the continent, and the entire world, citizens are seeking a government that is stable, has an underscored partnership with NATO, United States of America, and is fully convinced in its EU belonging. And this is a government that heads a progressive coalition and responds to citizens' needs, rather than a government coalition that is headed by one party that deems that the Russian aggression to Ukraine is the right one. Not a government and coalition that deems that the occupied territories in Ukraine should be declared independent and belong to Russia after this occupation. It's not a government that wishes for North Macedonia to deviate from its path to NATO and EU and deteriorate its relations with Kosovo and the Republic of Albania, and the relations with our neighbor Greece, thus disturbing the Prespa agreement and also disturb our relations with the Republic of Bulgaria by terminating the good neighborly relations agreement and also deteriorate the relations with all the communities in our country by terminating the Ohrid Framework Agreement. So this is the challenge of this government and this government coalition, that basically was overcome and commitments have been made. If you remember, 110 days ago to create this majority in our government, and therefore I'm saying that the leitmotif of this government, of the Prime Minister Kovacevski, SDSM, Alternative, Liberals and the other parties, part of this coalition is stability. Citizens want to see stability and predictability. They don't want to see, anticipate and not to be secure. Our country, dear guests, has the adequate government in the respective time, which is wanted by the citizens, Euro-American, fully persuaded to the Euro-American values and convictions, 100% without any hesitation. This government, in addition to its political stability and our secure European path, has managed the health crisis properly, the energy crisis as well, the price crisis and the military crisis. This is a government that is needed by our citizens in unpredictable times, and not a government that takes adventures, and we managed to sustain social peace and create social stability. Let me be more specific. Throughout my time of these 100 days, but also in the previous government, was fully dedicated to resolving all the issues that were held hostage in the past days with the Director and Minister of Transport and Roads. We focused on infrastructural projects. Corridor 8 will be implemented. Then we completed the tender procedure to select the consultants and financial advisors to implement the tender of Corridor 8 with the American Bechtel company that you all know. And now we are a few days prior to selecting the consultant, and immediately after that, within 21 days, negotiations should be completed with the Bechtel consortium to have our highway constructed from Skopje to Kafkasan and from Prilep to Bitola. I believe, and I'm fully convinced, that if these two processes that should be completed within 1 or 1.5 months will be successfully completed, and will put the foundations at the beginning of the month of July, and this is the most major infrastructural project in the history of North Macedonia. In parallel, in addition to Corridor 8, with the Minister of Finance and the Minister of Transport, we've been working completely dedicated to complete the highway Skopje-Blace. And 2 or 3 weeks ago, we adopted the alignment of this road, and through the EBRD credit line, we will have this project implemented, and the next 10 kilometers of the highway between Skopje and Blace should be completed before the fall. And we will follow the same procedure for the section from Kičevo to Bukočam, being connected with Corridor 8, and the other section of Corridor 8 in the project, the so-called Chinese projects, you'll be hearing by the Deputy Prime Minister of Economic Affairs. So this is a priority, not only mine, but of the entire government. And I'm absolutely sure by the end of this mandate, we will have a clear, we will actually have the road constructed between Blace and Kafkasan and between Prilep and Bitola, wrapping up all the infrastructural projects, thus assisting our economy to implement something less than 2 billion euro within a 3 to 4 years period in our country. This will be great assistance to all the companies in the country and the economy. I am convinced that there's not going to be a domestic company that will remain jobless. About all of these projects will be opening as of next year after we sign these 3 highways, and our priority is the railroad from Kičevo to the village of Lina, Pogradec, and with the director Lokvenec, we are refreshing the project that has been ready-made and funded by the EU, and we sent a request to fund this the construction of this railway, to also renew the Corridor 8 railway entirely from Bulgaria to Albania. Since I'm here, a few political messages. We are a political government. We're not a technical government. And in connection with certain topical issues raised by the opposition that you might face as journalists and citizens, the Democratic Union for Integration, as a participant in this coalition, deems that early elections can be held in April 2024 together with the presidential elections. The Democratic Union for Integration, as part of this coalition, has been strongly supporting the parliamentary majority, the government coalition, and we are here to implement these projects. Citizens do not need insecurity and adventure and unpredictability, because this is somebody else's plan. As I said on the outset, citizens need a responsible and social government that hears what they have to say and implements their demands. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you, Deputy Prime Minister Grubi. We move on with the next question posed to the Deputy Prime Minister in the government responsible for the good governance policy, Ms. Slavica Grkovska. Deputy Prime Minister Grkovska, how much good governance, transparency and accountability remain the roadmap in all the activities and priorities of the government? What are you undertaking as measures in terms of transparency, accountability, in terms of budget spending and generally? And are you happy with the pace at which judiciary reforms and fight against corruption is taking place? And I would add there the digitization model. And to what extent do you deem that this is an efficient mechanism to make sure efficient services are provided to our citizens and increase transparency and accountability? You may take the floor. Can you hear me now? Okay. Thank you for the questions. The very fact that there is an office, a cabinet for policy making on good governance is another indicator that this government is placing a special focus on transparency, accountability and professionalism in the operation of institutions, as well as digital transformation of society, which means that this government is moving a step forward compared to all the previous governments to accomplish professional, transparent and open operation of the institutions in their role as services to citizens. I can happily say that since 2018 onwards, significant progress has been made in terms of transparency. For us, it is even a greater challenge to improve this situation even more, and we are aware that progress in this sense is possible if there is cooperation in place with all the institutions and all relevant stakeholders and factors that share the same goal, and therefore we implemented a partnership relationship together with the State Commission for Fight Against Corruption, the State Audit Office, the Inspection Council, as well as all the other stakeholders in civil society that share the same goal in the area of transparency, professionalism, and accountability of institutions in terms of anti-corruption policy making, and digital transformation of our society. Certainly, in terms of transparency, what is of special interest to the general public is how budget funds are spent. And one of the measures that we proposed is by tasking all the institutions to put on their websites a special tab where they would be published the public procurement plans, the implemented public procurements, contracts awarded and implemented contracts, thus simplifying the information for every citizen to find out all the relevant information that is related to this aspect. Certainly a lot has to be done. The plan and the program of the Cabinet for Policy Making on Good Governance is quite ambitious for this year, and hopefully soon we'll be informing the general public on other activities that we have already initiated and will be implemented. When it comes to the digital transformation, society digital transformation, I'd like to underscore the cooperation that together with the Estonian Center and in cooperation with the American Embassy, we are doing to identify the best possible solutions for digital transformation of our society. Quite a lot has been done. However, a lot of work is ahead of us in terms of activities that have been initiated but should be continued to create a national plan on electronic ID and certain possibilities in the law required to intensify the process. I'd like to point out here that all of these processes virtually would have been impossible without the cooperation of our international partners. I'd like to extend my gratitude to our international partners that have been accompanied us throughout all of these processes, United States, the EU, USAID, and other international organizations that have been selflessly giving their support to the cabinet and to the policy making, because the importance of good policy making to increase democratization and transparency of society has been well acknowledged across the world. Thank you, Ms. Garkovska. Now there are questions for the Deputy Prime Minister of Economic economic issues, Mr. Fatimir Bitici. Minimum wage was a historically important step undertaken by the government members. Are you providing that such increases in wages will affect all stakeholders, and do you have any plan to implement this? And another topic interesting for the general public is to identify the activities undertaken by the state in terms of the implementation of capital projects of strategic importance for the country. You may take the floor. Let me try. Maybe this is better. Okay. Thank you for the questions. For the sake of time, I'll speak in Macedonian, and certainly if there are further questions, I'll use the other language as well. First of all, I think that these 100 days have shown what every government should show, which is that the government drafting, the government program drafting is not a business of somebody else rather than the main stakeholders in the government. And everything that has been happening within 100 days is a result of the programmatic decisions of the government. We specify that all of the activities to be undertaken towards improving living standards, which incorporate the increase of minimum wages and pensions, will take place in the first 100 days. However, they will not happen as we used to see them in the past. but through a process of dialogue, negotiations, and consultation with all stakeholders. Certainly, the increase in the minimum wages was subject of negotiation in the Economic and Social Council in a tripartite discussion of all the stakeholders that are an element of this council, which are representatives of trade unions, then the organization of employers and the government. And for the first time ever, we reached a consensus to increase the minimum wages, regardless of all the other circumstances affecting this decision. And certainly, we reached a decision and an agreement to level off and harmonize the minimum wages, not only in the private sector, but also in the public sector. And we as a government cannot request something from the private sector if we do not show consistency in the implementation of the legislation. And therefore, in the first government, once we adopted the law on minimum wage, we reached a decision to level off all the wages in the public sector to reach the level of the minimum wage, thereby bearing in mind Article 8A from the law on minimum wage, saying that the period of harmonization would be 6 months. Unfortunately, this was abused by someone, and prior to initiating the dialogue to harmonize the salaries in the entire public sector, they entered some activities that we could see these days, as was the strike in the education sector. Thereby, we opened a dialogue with the representative trade union to reach a general bargaining agreement and find once and for all a systemic solution to the issue of wages in the public sector, but not only there. And when we're talking about the minimum wage, I think that the general public does not know this a lot, but for the first time ever, as a government, as social partners, we reached a solution that is sustainable, which is we defined a methodology to harmonize the minimum wage following certain criteria. So we're putting the discussion ad acta that that the minimum wages should be harmonized with the living standards and the growth of living standards, or possibly inflation. We created a methodology that is in place, and that will make sure that workers will always receive higher wages that go hand in hand with the living standards increase. We are requesting the same for the harmonization of the wages in the public sector, but other sectors as well. Hence, not forgetting that we need to be consistent, that if we request from the private sector increased productivity, effectiveness, efficiency, we need to demand that from the public sector as well, productivity, efficiency, and effectiveness, because we must not forget that the public sector is here to serve the citizens. And I deem that this was taken into consideration. We are aware we have a period of 6 months, and the solutions are at the table already, but this is going to be done through negotiation. As regards capital investments, I deem that what the first Deputy Prime Minister has said is indeed true. Instead of requesting and seeking solutions, to actually have a systemic and sustainable way of resolving the solutions, of providing the solutions. We are continuously trying to resolve ad hoc issues in the system. And for the first time ever, we are introducing a systemic system by establishing a unit to monitor infrastructural projects that will have to help in terms of monitoring capital investment, regardless of the institutions implementing them, and thus removing the impediments in the implementation of this capital investment. And this is because we deeply believe that only systemic issue resolution is sustainable solution of problems. Unfortunately, after 30 years, we have not identified a system that will make sure that investments and capital investments will be smoothly implemented. Number two, investment in human capital, in human resources. We cannot have capital investment without sufficient human resources. For the first time ever after 15 years, this year, 100 different officials from 26 institutions have been trained in project management and FIDIC rules. We are talking about the implementation of capital investments in a country that does not have yet the FIDIC rules translated, which are the international rules for capital investment in construction. What are we talking about here? Therefore, what we started in the first 100 days is just a roadmap on where we should go. That is to say, identify and create systemic, sustainable solutions, investment in human resources to increase their productivity and efficiency in their work. This is the path to be followed, and I think that this is the answer to what is going to happen in the coming period.
Thank you very much, Deputy Prime Minister Betici. The last question on this question is addressed to Bojan Marecic, and the question is the following. The war in Ukraine, in the most tragic way, showed that the expansion of the Western Balkan is a security issue. Can you give your opinion about the progress of the talks between Bulgaria and our country, and what is the preparedness of our country for the integration? Is the government continuing to work which will help us to open and close the chapters as quick as possible? Thank you very much. I will be answering from here because I have some information, and it is a lot easier for me concerning the presentation. I think that, as my previous speakers have already mentioned, this government had to face a great deal of problems, and it has to resolve them immediately. This is a big challenge, and it also gives an opportunity for success. As you mentioned about the negotiations with Bulgaria, I'm sure that Minister of Foreign Affairs will be further commenting on this. I will be concentrating about the preparedness of the government. I think that for the first time, the process of negotiations, for the first time, we have established a rational discussion, which are touching different topics, and they provide a diversification about the topics that we are discussing about. The process is no longer trapped on the issues of history, and we are seeing some results despite all the obstacles. The most important is for us to commit ourselves to show mutual respect and European values. We have realized a concrete project and to intensify the communication. The two groups have done a lot, and it is good for the respective ministers to talk about what they've achieved. We need to use this energy during this year and during the French presidency in order to make a serious progress. It's good that France is chairperson of the European chairmanship of the European Union, and it is devoted to the progress of the Euro integration of Western Balkans and the use of the new methodology. I think that the trajectory which we have adopted with the new government of Bulgaria, it is the only path that can lead us to success. All the other obstacles that may occur, I can see them only as efforts made by the nationalists to impede this. We, as a progressive, rational European government, will make progress. We are prepared to continue these discussions. because they have a key importance to us, is the protection of the Macedonian language and the identity. And a key interest is, along with this protection of this identity, to commence and continue with the negotiations. In terms of preparedness, Republic of North Macedonia has 17 years of experience as candidate status, and we are the first country, short before Croatia. We acquired the status of Croatia has been 9 years already fully fledged member of European Union. But during the past 5 years, we have made intensive progress. If we look at the data, having in mind the stabilization and association, which has been running for the past 20 years, with all the efforts that we have made towards the regular information of the European Union, we are about 40% readiness and preparedness. This is not a little. This is promising, and it only shows that once we start the negotiations, it'll take a little while before we the best reflection to this are the European reports. From 2009 onwards, we have received positive reports. Some have certain critics about the progress, but in the past 4 years, we had good reports which have verified the successes and also indicated the weaknesses, which gives us the further motivation to continue. I'll be very brief. The level of preparedness of the Republic of North Macedonia is the biggest and it is the highest in the region, and it's reflected and it shows that it's even more emphasized for the first cluster. The foundations, we are even better of the other countries that are in the process of negotiations. We have a good starting position, but the most important is that we are given a chance to start the negotiations. And despite the efforts that we are making in this initial first 100 days to revive the structure, our integrations have been sacrificed because of bilateral issues, and we will endeavor to close these issues in order to commit ourselves and dedicate ourselves to the transformation and Europeization of our country in order to see us and become one day to become a proud member of the European Union. We are doing this for our own good. We as the Secretariat, we are trying to revive the IPA structure, improve the coordinations of donor. Next week we will be having a big conference of all donors of the European Union in order to do the maximum concerning the assistance that we are receiving, in order to fulfill our European Union priorities. I'm convinced that we are pretty fairly prepared, and the citizens will be able to see this soon. Thank you. Thank you, Deputy Prime Minister Maric. This was the last question from the second panel on the 100 days. Now I'm cordially inviting you to have a break, and we will be continuing with the third panel session and the
Продолжуваме со
We're continuing with our third session from the forum, 100 Days of the Government. This is a session which will be participated by the ministers of government. Just to clarify, the ministers will be answering only to one question, and it is on the basis of the questions that we received at this forum and shall relate to the respective line ministry. The first question relates to Bujar Osmani. Mr. Osmani, ahead of us there's a period of challenges and relates to the Euro integration. Republic of Bulgaria imposed a veto, and we need to find a solution during the presidency of France. Is the government going to put this issue to rest if there's no solution to the issue? As well as that, the Ukrainian situation opened up new issues about the foreign affairs matters. What is the experience from the past period? The floor is yours. Thank you for your question. Allow me to greet you all and to thank you for your attendance. I will make a few points about this issue. Today is the 28th of April, the day of the day of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and all those that are across working in the diplomatic council. We rounded up the 61st. We opened up a new embassy in Bratislava, and we're working on the opening a consular department in Zurich. Maybe you are seeing me often on TV appearances. I will come out of reach one day, but I will not be able to say anything further unless we had these diplomats when they deserve to be congratulated for all the work that they do in their respective consular representative offices. In regards to yesterday's day, it just happened to coincide with the day of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs Ministry, the decision about a statement about a strategic partnership with the USA to transform this in a strategic dialogue, and I think this is a very important event in the relationship between the Republic of North Macedonia and United States of America. But in retrospectively, we will see that what happened today, it is of great importance for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, which will be leading the strategic negotiations in Washington, and all the colleagues that are going to be participating at that meeting. The third issue concerns the Russian aggression of the Ukraine, and this has impacted the international legal the Republic of North Macedonia proved to be a credible member of the NATO in the region by showing its Republic of North Macedonia united with the condemnation of the Russian aggression. We joined the sanctions, not only the initial sanctions as a response to the aggression, but all other restrictive measures after the annexation of Crimea. And we harmonized the security. We are not only a candidate, but we have achieved 100% harmonization. Albania, Montenegro, and Kosovo We have 100% of harmonization with those countries. We secured all kinds of assistance to Ukraine. We have also opened our borders to the Ukraine and the refugees. And I hope that we will be able to proactively accept the refugees from Ukraine, despite the financial circumstances of the country. In terms of negotiations with the Republic of Bulgaria, I believe that in this process we achieved a great deal of things. We have used every millimeter of the space which was drafted by the declaration from the Parliament as a maneuvering. And I think that what we have now, it appears to be the best solution for the both parties. But the opportunities will be, the window of opportunity will be shutting down in a few weeks' time from now. After the closure of this space, there will be very little political capital and energy for anyone to dedicate in the same rhythm as we have been during the past 100 days. The government was topic-oriented, and the only issue was the relationship with Bulgaria. But they have met a lot more with the Bulgarian ministers. This will be a long-term decision of the problem. I think that there's not enough energy and capital after this window of opportunity closes. Then we will have to look at the internal issues of the country. This would mean that the European Union would have to decide, but the ball will be in the court of Sofia, because we did everything that we could have possibly do as a constructive partners. Cultural, geographical, we are part of the union, but the process does no longer depend on us. It all depends on what the union steps will be undertaken. It is no longer the issue of values, but it is more issue of security. We are continuing further. Question to Minister of Defense, Slavina Petrovska. When we have aggression and a humanitarian crisis, what does this mean about the stability at home and the membership of in the alliance of the NATO? What does this mean in terms of how does this affect our country? Thank you very much. It is expected that, as mentioned by my colleague Boyar, that the situation in Ukraine is looked at the security aspect, and what does our membership in the NATO mean? Just to put it in a simple sense, NATO means security and stability for the citizens and all the subjects that exist here. It is related also to many other issues that concern all of us. It is related to the economic situation, to the rule of law, that the membership in NATO on the 24th of February, when the Russian aggression commenced in Ukraine, we all asked the question, what's going to happen with us? Are we safe? Yes, we are safe. If one country is attacked, that means all other countries have been attacked. It is the alliance and the unity. This showed again that the NATO alliance have become a lot more tougher. What about the gains from NATO membership of our country? Are these only gains from security aspects only, or is it a much wider spectrum? Absolutely yes, affirmative. It provides a security to would-be investors that are willing to invest in our country, which means that we have met all these conditions. This also gives the opportunity to have local companies. We're contributing towards the development of local economies. What I was committed during the past 100 days, and I'm expected to commit myself even more, the Center for the Support of the Domestic Companies who wish to be promoted in the NATO market. One might say that this is not a duty of the Ministry of Defense, but as one of the segments of our work, that we are coordinating our activities with the economic sectors with our respective colleagues. Furthermore, opens up the door for alliance and a partnership with the respective chambers of commerce within our country and outside of our country. What are the gains that our army received? Yes, before becoming a member, we have further developed the capacities of our own army. Just a few weeks ago, this was concluded successfully, the assessment of the 1st Battalion of our army, which is ready and prepared according to the NATO standards. This proved again that the investment in the army are true, and it's a long-term and multi-annual effort, and it is being going on a right track. We have adopted a plan with a few governments, and we are yet to conclude agreements with other foreign countries to obtain a new equipment to further develop the capacities of our army. Especially this relates to the members of the army. You cannot have a strong and successful army, nor you can have a successful state unless you devote your attention to the human capacities. This is why we established a regular dialogue with the trade unions in defense, and we are resolving all these issues, and we are trying to strike commonly acceptable solutions. This is in the interest of all those working in the trade unions and in the army. This was a brief overview about our membership in NATO. Of course, we are facing serious challenges. Our membership in NATO does not mean only to listen and fulfill the already adopted decision. This means that we are actively participating in the decision-making. We have, in recent times, made decisions, and our inclusion into the sanctions, which meant support in practical sense, not only political, but also military assistance provided to Ukraine. We have dispatched a message that we fully support the sovereignty and the integrity of this country. As a member of NATO, we are prepared to face all the challenges which are ahead of us. And of course, the Ministry of Defense and the Army remain open for cooperation with the remaining subjects because you cannot have a process in a country unless you make this process inclusive. I will finish by saying, from the aspects of defense and the security of the state and the region itself, this kind of a crisis, especially the crisis in Ukraine and the reflections over the region, shows that we cannot have a stable Europe unless we have a fully integrated Western Balkans. Our behavior and conduct in a NATO alliance shows that we are a credible alliance, and we should commence our negotiations with the European Union in order to become a fully fledged member of the EU. This will also serve as a positive example for the regional stability and security. We are saying this in a political sense, and also by our involvement in the various missions in Kosovo and Bosnia and Herzegovina. We are proving that our country used to be the recipient of these services, but now we are a contributor of the similar services to the other country. We continue further up. A question from the Minister of Ms. Ministry of Internal Affairs.
Suzbivање на криминал.
What specific activities have you performed to suppress crime, illicit trafficking in drugs and other psychotropic substances, and maintenance of peace and order? What has been undertaken to increase professionalism and efficiency of the police force, and what are the benefits of that for the citizens? Can they feel more secure and safer? And another question, what is the country, the government undertaken to reduce the number of victims in traffic casualties? Thank you, dear Prime Minister, my dear colleagues, ministers, Your Excellencies, ambassadors, dear representatives of the media. I'll try very briefly, although from the questions, if we need to provide the specific answers, it will take more than 1 hour to discuss these topics. These were the top priorities identified by the Ministry of Interior, primarily in the area of fight against crime and corruption, illicit trafficking in drugs and firearms, illegal migration, all of that is a challenge in this new era, the fight against terrorism. And here we have indeed noticeable, remarkable results in the past 100 days. And I would like to underscore the phenomenon of fight against corruption, because it's oftentimes discussed in the public. However, very few comments have you heard about the results related to the activities undertaken in this direction. Certainly, in terms of drug trafficking, I'd like to point out that in this period of 100 days, we have developed 8 criminal groups being composed of 33 criminals, primarily for international transport of marijuana and precursors. We prevented street dealing in narcotics, and within a period of 100 days, 7 kilograms of heroin have been seized, amounting to €300. Then 1.2 tons, 7 tons of amphetamines, amounting to €200 million estimates, 2.2 tons of marijuana, amounting to €5 million. And in terms of street dealership, we have searched about 40 locations where larger amounts of heroin, amphetamines, marijuana, and other drugs and precursors have been seized, and a makeshift laboratory for the production of marijuana in the area of Gegelia was detected. This is the strategical setup of the ministry in the previous period. In terms of smuggling in arms, 46 crimes have been detected with 35 perpetrators, and within this period we have seen a seizure of 45 illegal arms and about 20,000 pieces of pyrotechnical means. 28 cases of smuggling of migrants have been detected, about 252 migrants, or 3,844 attempts for illegal border crossing have been detected, most of them coming from the Republic of Greece. Under the statistics, we are noting a trend of reduction of illegal migration. Simply, the Republic of North Macedonia is not that attractive to be crossed and to be used as a route. In terms of corruption, this is one of the important priorities of the Ministry of Interior. In 2021, we had a 50% increased efficiency in the area of corruption detection, with more than 113 million dinars in damages. And within these 100 days, we have 28 criminal cases with corruptive elements, 47 perpetrators, and most of them relating to abuse of office and authorizations. And certainly we have cases of negligent work and bribery. As regards 2021, we had 157 criminal cases or 261 perpetrators, and these results should be much more publicated in the general public if we wish to point out the fight against corruption and raise awareness in this regard. And precisely for that, we had a leap of 24 positions under the corruption on fight against corruption of Transparency International in 2021 is due to this commitment of this ministry and all the agencies related to the law enforcement. So this is one area in terms of motivation and improving the conditions in these 100 days. We are undertaking intensive activities to equip and better the conditions for police officers, complete renovations of 4 facilities, then 4 additional facilities are under reconstruction. We are going to reconstruct 3 important facilities. The Department of Internal Affairs, then police units, and construction of the new police station in Aerodrome area. And certainly new 4 facilities, police facilities, will be reconstructed by the end of this year, thus undertaking activities in the area of capital investment. In 2021, we followed the principles of the government, and now in the Ministry of Interior's facilities we are not using fossil fuels or crude oil to protect the environment. We transited to eco heating facilities, full procurement of our uniforms, and 2 days ago the last delivery was made of high boots, special boots, SWAT boots, and we also amended the 2 laws, the law on interior and the law on police, in line with the Greco recommendations. We established the principles of strengthening the police officer's integrity. There is a prohibition to be part of a political party for each police officer, because I deem both the leadership and this government that Macedonian police officers must serve the citizens and the country and not the politics and individuals, and this is going to be a top priority in managing the Macedonian police force. Certainly the test of integrity while hiring of each individual police officer has been underlined by this law. Each police officer shall fill out a declaration on their resources and to see the movements of their resources in the course of his career or her career, and many other activities undertaken in this area. This is just a small part of what we've done in the previous 100 days. And therefore, I wish to publicly extend my gratitude to the managerial team of the Ministry of Interior, all police officers, for their dedication and commitment to their work. I thank all my colleague ministers, directors of institutions we've been collaborating with, and most of all, I wish to thank you, the media and citizens, for the support in these 100 days. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Minister Spasovski. The next question is to the Minister of Justice, Mr. Nikola Tupanchevsky. The Ministry of Justice has established a law to secure an efficient system for free legal aid to citizens lacking sufficient funds for that. Is this system in operation? What are the benefits for the citizens, and what is the status regarding this issue? And at the same time, what is the status regarding the judiciary reforms? What pieces of legislation are priority currently, and what are their implications in terms of improving the conditions, independence, autonomy, and integrity of the judiciary? Thank you for the question. This is one question with a lot of sub-questions. I'll try to be brief in the interest of time. About the free legal aid you mentioned, it's virtually an affirmation or reaffirmation of another EU standard articulated through the enactment of the law on free legal aid, which means that the principle of the modern value is reaffirmed, that each of us shall have equal access to justice. When I say all of us. I'm including the natural persons that can go under the group of unprotected, that cannot financially afford actually their rights to exercise their rights to justice. And one statistical data to corroborate this, that last year regarding this primary free legal assistance, there's been improvement of the situation, exponential growth of 53.7%. On an upward line. As regards secondary legal assistance, it amounts to 20%. So most of the activities and achievements of the Ministry of Justice can be viewed at the website of the Ministry of Justice, and one or two sentences about the second group of questions. So we have a rich legislative agenda that can be systematized under three corpuses. The first one, legal preparation, legislation preparation, then procedural aspects, and the third question is legislation that is in parliamentary procedure, then the law on pardoning, the law on expert testimonials, and the law on justice for children. I'm mentioning the law on pardoning in a special context because this is a law that will disable different interpretation of the possibilities for the President of the State and the Ministry of Justice to articulate their right regarding people filing for being pardoned. Once again, thank you for the questions, and I believe I was brief. Thank you. The next question is addressed to the Minister of Finance, Mr. Fatmir Besimi. Would the IMF mission, once approving and granting the credit loan, the loan line will continue the loan, and what about the NATO commitments, and what are the current mechanisms for protection? What is the impact of the non-interest credit loans of the EBRD, and what are the credit packages? In terms of the question, I'd like to make a comment. When we discuss economic issues and other topics, primarily the first thing that should be distinguished is the context. Currently, we are talking about a context of an economic crisis back-to-back, starting from COVID-19, then in 2021 we started the economic recovery, and by the end of 2021 we were affected by the economic and price crisis and energy prices, and it even got more complicated through the war that was caused in Ukraine by Russia's aggression. This created much more insecurities in the EU market, which is our main trade partner. We are talking about the period of the largest economic crisis after the Second World War onwards, also taking into account the financial crisis of 2007, 2009, then the COVID crisis. The scope and under all the projections of international institutions, the first projections are now being reviewed downwards. So what was envisaged for 2022 will be much more complicated to be implemented with a slowed down economic growth, which affects us as well. What makes us different in terms of the COVID crisis is that the budgetary deficits are showing that it's much more expensive now to be funded on the international markets. 160 million euro are paid on interest from our budget. It's not the annuity principal, the repayment, but only interest, which is 1.3 percentage point of GDP. And certainly the issue arises, how is the government going to fund this deficit that is obviously happening, which is to identify cheaper and more beneficial conditions to fund this deficit. And this is the key approach we took to the international financial institutions. But not only this, also it's extremely important that through this, not only the level of and the price of funding is important, but the message that we are sending for this situation, we approach these international institutions and the instrument we're using, a clear distinction must be made. The instrument we are discussing currently with the International Monetary Fund is an extremely highly ranked instrument defined for countries with solid economic policies confirmed by Article 4 of IMF for the previous period, and also in the informal board we've been qualified in this area. So it's an instrument that the International Monetary Fund points actually shows trust in the government's policies on how the government is managing the situation, and a solid macroeconomic framework that will help to preserve this framework and stability in conditions of external shocks when our economy is affected both in trade balance and payment balance and the internal price level, to be able to sustain this solid, sound macroeconomic policy. In this context, I'd like to share with you today, the Ministry of Finance, in the course of the day, will publish a piece of data on the public debt at the end of the fourth quarter. We ended up the year with a 68.8% level, lower than the projections. The 31st of March 2022, the public debt amounted to 57.1% of GDP, which is 3.7 percentage points lower than what we had in December 2021. Transformed into money, it is 454 million euro additional financial maneuvering space for what is coming in the course of the year. So it's an extremely responsible approach by all the colleagues in the government, and in this situation we have an increased collection of payments compared to last year by 20%. Then we have customs administration and public administration. We have increased the tax revenues for the first 4 months by 20, 25 or 30% respectively in the area of customs fees and taxes. So we have had duties, that is to say, and our performances were very good. And in terms of capital expenditures, that increased by 17% compared to the plan, but compared to last year, they have been higher by 37%. If last year we had 6.1 billion implementation of capital expenditures by state institutions in the first 4 months last year, now we have 7.4 billion dinars, which is a significantly higher implementation that will mitigate the effects that we have had in terms of the crisis. So this is good news in these difficult times. So this is about an extremely, I guess this is the same speech. Истото е од преска, така? This is the same presentation, but in Albanian. So measures shall be undertaken for citizens having the need for that, and companies for the power and energy sources, resources to reduce the price shocks. And what's important to negotiate with IMF is to reduce the cost of funding of this economic situation. And I wish to share some official news with you, which is the public debt by the end of March this year, amounting to 57.1% of GDP, which is lower than December 60.8%. Thus creating this room for maneuvering in the coming period.
për të lehtësuar ngarkesën ekonomike që
Okay, so this is the same information presented previously, so I don't think I will translate it again.
Pjesë të tyre nga banka për zhvillim, këtu është dhe drejtori, dhe një pjesë tjetër me bankat komerciale në bashkëpunim me banka.
So EBRD will take part and the other commercial banks in funding for small and medium-sized enterprises to assist companies with conducive credit lines, loans, that is to say. So we'll continue with a sustainable package of measures for the support in the coming period of small and medium-sized enterprises. As regards stability, the financial stability in the country is maintained. The law on financial stability is in parliamentary procedure with the National Bank and other regulators. This is in regular operation, and for many years now we have had the organic law on budgets where fiscal rules are provided, and the Fiscal Council that will even more strongly strengthen the capacity of our entities, regardless of their political provenience. I would like to ask all the stakeholders to enact this law because it's very important for the country and stability of our policies. Thank you. Thank you. We move on with the next question addressed to the Minister of Economy, Kreshnik Bekteshi. The Ukrainian crisis has deepened the crisis, especially the economic one. Did the country enter preparedly to handle this crisis, and is it ready to secure sufficient quantities of oil, wheat, corn, gas, since the war in Ukraine is escalating and spilling over to the rest of Europe, being translated both in economic and social crisis? And what specific steps in the past 100 days have this ministry taken to face these challenges caused by the Ukrainian war?
Thank you very much. Allow me to greet all the attendees, having in mind that one of the most current topics in terms of the supply with the food stuff, as it was mentioned by the Minister of Foreign Affairs, I will probably get out of the fridge, but from the stove, because we're talking about the basic food stuff, a continual supply with the basic goods needed for. And in this way, we are trying to cushion the effect of this as compared to the previous year, and the cooperation with the other institutions, especially with the cooperation with the Ministry of Finance in terms of the forecasting the energy needs. The VAT was reduced to 5%. We're also working on the plan of development of our domestic capacities and to make certain debalances from our energy companies, supply companies. And as of January, in the region, we are the leaders when it comes to dealing with the energy crisis. And in terms of how much does it cost the country with the increased energy prices. And this was done by the management or the leadership of the ESM, Electric Distribution Company of Macedonia. As Minister of Economy, we have been adopting certain measures for trade which determine the conditions applicable and the supply chain, like a production, and those wholesalers and the retail outlets with an aim to soften this pressure. We have frozen certain prices on certain products, and in cooperation with the respective chambers of commerce, we have introduced in terms of various measures in order to ensure the liquidity of the companies which are producing certain products. I'd like to also emphasize another important thing, and that concerns that having in mind that when dealing with the energy crisis, although this crisis has been imported to the Republic of North Macedonia, it also has a destructive sides, which means that in our artificial ways, attempts are made to deepen this crisis. And in the recent days, we have noticed that certain municipalities which are acting contrary to the applicable laws because they were not able to manage their own affairs, and the public lighting and all the public facilities and those that are in a free market. What does this mean? This means that as of January until the end of June, the municipalities are trying to create an artificial problem in order to hike up the price, which means that the costs will be borne by the various households in the respective municipalities. These are additional costs in the amount of 50 million euros, and the aim is to create an artificial crisis, which means that the households would have a much greater costs to running their own budgets. But we are ready, and we will not let this happen. We are at the end of finalizing the tariff concerning the prices, along with the cabinet of the Prime Minister and all other institutions. We will introduce block tariffs through which we will protect the citizens, and the vulnerable groups will be paying a lot less, and those who are using the system in order to pass on the additional costs to the citizens. We will not allow this to happen. And in other words, we will allow for the production of solar panel energy and the energy that is encompassed in a low energy. In terms of forbidding the additional exports, the customs agencies, we have seen that there's a great amount of imports of cooking oil, not only in the past 23 days. This means that we have a sufficient amount of these goods, which are the most problematic, which resulted of the invasion of Russia to Ukraine. And in line with this data, we will allow the exports of our producers in order to this to have an effect to the overall price on the domestic market. We are continually monitoring the situation, and I'd like to use this opportunity to make an appeal once again, especially to the management of these respective municipalities and those that are trying to hike up the prices, not to do this. And we will publicly announce which are the municipalities that are trying to impose additional costs of to their citizens, without assuming a reasonable amount of responsibility when it comes to resolving this issue, energy related. Thank you, Minister, for your response to this. We're continuing with the third question. The vaccination is one of the most successful preventive measures to protect the population from diseases. The pandemics emphasizes what is the plan related to the further vaccination with the COVID-19. Has there been any announcement of need to take the fourth vaccine or shot? Also, another topic of interest of the public is the government working on securing greater amount of medications which will be prescription available. Floor is yours, Minister. Thank you very much for the questions. Dear attendees, the vaccination, as you know, is one of the most efficient ways to provide protection for the population. The vaccines that we are using in our country are safe and secure. During the past 100 days, we have undertaken steps to continue with the vaccinations and to make it available at their residential places. First, we completed a campaign about immunization and the protection of the population. We divided the focus groups according to their age groups, above 65 years old, and the younger groups who fall under the category of being more at risk because of risk illnesses. We made a call to all these patients to attend this vaccination centers by sending SMS messages, and through my time we also organized a caravan for vaccination, which was in a close cooperation and support by the WHO and the USAID. 14 communities were visited, and we have enabled the creation of records of all those that have been vaccinated in the country and outside of the country. In terms of the fourth shot or the fourth vaccine, the situation is rather calm. We are observing and monitoring the situation, and the epidemiological situation will dictate the further steps. In terms of the second question that relates to the medication, like a prescription medication, as you know, we have undertaken negotiations with all the importers of medications in our country. And as a result of successful negotiations, we reached an agreement to apply new prices for the prescription medication and the generic medications, which will be used in the primary level and in the common situations. In terms of the modernization of the health and the health facilities, we are continually investing in equipping our respective institutions, especially at the Institute of Radiology. Recently, we have introduced a computer tomography and magnetic resonance, which was realized in cooperation with the World Bank, with a grant given to us by the Embassy of Japan. We have acquired modern equipment, which was distributed to the pulmonology, the new computer system for diagnostics. And in terms of health threats, we have secured 3 in Sveti and Erasmo Hospital in Ohrid, and General Hospital in Strumica and in Prilep, and 5 apparatuses or machines were sent to the General Hospital in Kumanovo, Kičevo, and in Gevgelia about the tomography and the magnetic resonance. Thank you very much for your answers. We are continuing with a further question, and it relates to the Minister of Education, Yeter Shakiri. The small businesses are characteristic about many of the economies, but many young people do not have sufficient skills in order to achieve those ambitions. Does the minister have a plan to include the entrepreneurship so that the young people will acquire the necessary skills in order to overcome the issues and the knowledge about running a business. What are the measures when it comes to the modernization of education, and what are the steps that the ministry has undertaken in order to prepare our students for further employment? And as another topic which is of interest of the public and also important for the education, what are the capital investments in this sector, and what are the plans for the future activities? Thank you very much for your question. Allow me to greet all the attendees today, and express my gratitude to all the teachers in the high school and in primary school. I'm really happy that the education process commenced and recommenced, and I'm sure that students are much more happier than any of us that they had a chance to return to their schools. This is the essential about the actual processes which relate to the high school and the higher education. We have commenced activities in the high school and the higher education. And the goal is to ensure that the education runs smoothly so they can derive the concept to make it simple, and that this teaching will not rely only on the facts and memorizing or learning things by heart. When it comes to the concept of entrepreneurship and the digitalization, we are striving to achieve and prepare our young generations for them to be able to be skilled up enough to face these challenges. This is very important when it comes to the process of reforms in the area of higher education and high school and higher education. In our country in recent years, about 2 years ago, we had 11 dual language classrooms, and we had hundreds. But in this year, when the enrollments starts, we will have more than bilingual classrooms. This is very important because in the bilingual schools, we realize the cooperation, the close cooperation with the local self-governments and the local economic chambers, and in direct communication with the respective economic chambers, we realize the needs of the labor market. In this bilingual classrooms, they had the opportunity to learn about the needs that are dictated by this reform processes. The epicenter and the focus shall be devoted to make and the way in which the teaching is conducted, that this should be interactive teaching. We currently have a new high school starting from Vizbegovo, Blace, municipality of Gjorče, Petrov. Also, we have a similar 40 facilities which are undergoing a reconstruction, and very shortly this reconstruction will be completed. I think that with a good educational process, where the focus will fall on the students, and to enable to bring the teachers to the level to teach their subjects in more efficient curricula, by which we will meet the needs of the current labor market. The next questions relate to Jovana Trenčovska, Minister of Labor and Social Policy.
the strong support to the pensioners. Do you believe that this process is ended, or do you expect that this question will be reopened again depending on the political events? Part of the Centers for Social Works do need to improve their working conditions. What are the measures that you have undertaken in terms of capital investments which do have a direct impact on the day-to-day living of the citizens? And another interest, what is the ministry undertaking in order to reduce the numbers of unemployed people? Can we expect the improvement of the social services? Thank you very much for your questions. One question which covers many other topics. I'll try to be very brief by providing answers to all these topics. One of the priorities of the government and the Ministry of Labour and Social Policy was to increase, make sure that the pensions will be increased. And this was a promise, and it was also included as a part of a program of the government till 2024. This is why we made a commitment and made a promise that from the first month of the mandate that we will increase the pensions. Today we have a legal solution through which only we can reach this result through social dialogue engagement. And this we did with the pensions, along with all the stakeholders, through implementing a social dialogue. We introduced a new methodology, which means a harmonization of aligning the pensions with the running costs and the increase of the average salary. This is a systematic solution which will not depend on the political will of any government, past and future, but they will only have to implement the current legal solution. Despite this harmonization and the new methodology about harmonizing and aligning the pensions, we also did legal amendments to support about 330,000 pensioners by paying them the pensions for the March, April, and May in the amount of 1,000 dinars per month. Each pensioners will receive that in their own bank accounts. We are showing by this our commitment to improve the quality of the life of the most aged population of our respective citizens, and in order to pay them back about all their contributions that they did in the past. And in as a ministry, we are also investing in capital projects, and this capital investments would mean a better quality of life for every citizen. I'd just like to mention a few of the investments about the infrastructure, in investing in preschool kindergartens and the daycare centers for children and those with special needs, as well as investments in obtaining expertise staff which will be competent and which will staff that will be able to deliver better and improved services to the citizens. From 2017, we have opened about 69 new facilities, which means about for child protection or the kindergartens, which means that catering and caring for children, about 4,300 children. And during the 2020 and 2023, we intend to open 8 additional new facilities. Part of these facilities are currently being underway and being constructed. Some of the projects have been concluded in accordance with the tendering document, with the tender documentation, which means that by the end of 2023, we will be able to accommodate for additional 3,500 additional children. In terms of dealing with the unemployment issues, the government and the ministry has adopted a systematic approach in terms of resolving the issue of the unemployment or the providing employment for the long-term unemployed and the young people. We have implemented active measures for employment, the practicing work and law for youth allowances, through which we create measures for employment of the unemployed persons. In 2021, the overall number covered by these measures was 11,1993 unemployed people, and in 2022, and this number is being projected to cover and affect 14,845 people, and the funds that have been secured for the implementations is about 30 million euros, which confirms that in continuity we are increasing the available funds to implement the operational measures. We have additional 5 million available compared to the last year. When it comes to self-employment, which appears to be most attractive measures, we have extended assistance to additional 2,000 citizens and enabled them to receive various grants and to go about doing their own business like self-employment. To bring the social services much closer to the citizens, along with the cooperation with the units of the local self-governments, we are developing services which will detect the needs of the respective local self-government organizations. With over 25 local municipalities, we have signed agreement for providing this assistance, to provide assistance within the residential places and to provide assistance to elderly people. We are continuing to create measures and legal solutions which will provide and obtain a better service and improve the life of the average citizen. Thank you very much, Minister, for your... The next question relates to Goran Milevski, Minister of Local Self-Government. The economic development is important for the country. How about the cross-border cooperation?
Thank you. The ministry has proven within its 100 days that it's been a partner of municipalities through its daily work, and it's been confirmed on a daily basis. So we cannot say that we differently address the new mayors and members of municipal councils. On the contrary, we have increased the assistance provided in this period. I can say that in the first 100 days, which was not the case last year, we approved funds amounting to 20 million euro for cross-border cooperation, and where we signed agreements on cross-border cooperation amounting to 1.2 million euro with Serbia, 11 projects from the cross-border cooperation program with Albania amounting to 6 million euro. On 4th of May, on Wednesday, we will sign 22 agreements on 22 projects with the Greece program amounting to 7.6 million euro. We have published a new call with the Republic of Serbia, and we are preparing the new call with the Republic of Kosovo amounting to 3 million euro. The Bulgarian cross-border cooperation program has been 100% implemented, and 100% of the money from the EU has been utilized. In addition to these funds that we are co-funding and we are jointly funding together with the EU, the government has placed a call through the ministry, through the Bureau for Regional Development, amounting to 12 million euro. And this week, this call was over. We are providing fund support amounting to 12 million euro, and on top of that, 1.5 million euro directly from the Ministry of Local Self-Government to reduce the disbalances between different planning regions. So our financial support is not missing out, and the government encountered the needs, met the needs of the city of Skopje, which was the obligation of the city of Skopje. So we subsidized the heating bills, which is one of assistance. However, this is something that we've done within this 100 days to help citizens improve their living conditions and work uninterruptedly. And I can say that not only the financial support, but together with the Ministry of Finance, since this was the priority of our municipalities, this is in parliamentary procedure. Unfortunately, it's not been enacted yet. In terms of fiscal decentralization, the government has completed its obligation. And in terms of the VAT, we increased it by 50% from 4.6 to 6 share of VAT, and increasing the personal income tax going to municipalities from 3 to 6% increase. And I hope that the MPs in the coming period will find both the time and opportunity to pass this legislation to make it operational on the ground. In parallel with these activities, we completed the law on balanced regional development. We adopted the new 10-year strategy, and within these 10 days, we have made all the preparatory activities to open the law on local self-government. That, you know, it takes two-thirds majority to be enacted. We made all the preparations to open a wide debate, including all municipalities, zealous, academia, all stakeholders, to re-examine the law and review it. That is more than 20 years old. Maybe it will be linked to the territorial organization law or the law or intermunicipal cooperation. We are willing to debate on this, and we are open for discussion. So within this 100 days, we've made all the preparatory activities to open a wider debate with all stakeholders. And finally, what's an important topic opened within this 100 days is the digitalization of municipalities, prepared by the ministry, amounting to 30 million euros, submitted to the EU delegation with the aim to take over the process of digitalization of local government, because it's been done now ad hoc and partially. Each municipality digitalizes different services. We want to make it a uniform process and digitize it one municipality at a time, and make it for all municipalities, and supported by the EU. This very important process for transparency, accountability, efficient operation of local government will contribute to the facilitation of citizens in all municipalities. So this is briefly on the activities we've implemented in the past 100 days. We continue with the next question, addressed to the Minister of Culture, Ms. Bisera Kostadinovska-Stojčevska. The crisis has somehow shadowed culture, though this is not, this should not be the case, because it's the soul of society, even when it's most difficult. What are the greatest achievements with regard to this at the ministry since the mandate, and what are the challenges regarding all the problems we have? Thank you for the question. First of all, I have to point out that these were very intensive 100 days, not only in the area of culture, but in the area of entire living culture. After 2 years of work in pandemic conditions, it's worth should come out and show what it knows. However, culture faced an economic crisis, and this government responded adequately to how what the wages in the area of culture should be like. Yes, it's true that culture must be the soul of society. Cultural workers received their wages harmonized with the minimum wage and with the collective bargaining agreement that have reached a dignified level. In terms of addressing the challenges, prior to provide my answer to that, our main postulate, myself and my teams at the Ministry of Culture, was that we wish to provide continuity of what has been done properly up until now, and myself as a minister and as a person believe that good practices should not be changed but only promoted and continue their implementation. In these 100 days, we are continuing the strategic points of our country, protection of cultural heritage by implementing the legislation and positive policies in the area of cultural heritage protection. The projects funded every year by the annual program for public interest in the area of culture are underway. In terms of the procedures, yesterday we completed the public debate on the proposed law on the law on copyright and related rights in line with the EU regulation, and it's going to enter parliamentary procedure upon demand of the public. The law on showing public interest in culture was withdrawn, and it's going to be further elaborated and sent back to parliamentary procedure. Modifications requested by the public will be implemented in this law in order to cover all the segments of cultural activity. Capital investments are also an important segment of culture, and therefore for more than 10 million euro is invested in new theaters, new cultural centers. Our priority is still Kurbinovo and Stobi, where investments are made and they are implemented through cross-border cooperation projects. I have to point out that we are also trying to affirm the Macedonian language, and therefore we are making a call to affirm the Macedonian language that is going to be published soon. Also, cultural representation beyond the borders of our country is the priority of the ministry. One of these was the Biennale in Venice, started a few days ago. We are working on setting up cultural and information centers in the neighboring countries and beyond. We are starting with the implementation and preparation to implement the cultural program during the Czech presidency with the EU. So I wish to underline that culture will get its splendor back after these 2 years of pandemic. And once again, I wish to thank all people at the Ministry of Culture and all employees at cultural institutions that help making culture indeed the soul of society. Thank you, Ms. Minister, for your answer. Now we will hear from the Minister of Transport and Communications, Blagoje Bočvarski. What are the accomplishments in the area of capital investment in the road infrastructure? Will the highway Skopje-Kumanovo, the section prior to the first pay toll, is incorporated in the future investment plan and improvement of the road network? Will you continue with the capital projects through the correction of the budget, the review of the budget, or some reallocations or reductions are expected in terms of the road network? You may take the floor. Thank you for the question. Dear attendees, dear colleagues, ministers at the government, Prime Minister, Deputy Prime Ministers, dear media, first of all, I'm very glad to be able to present part of the projects and what has been implemented in the first 100 days of the operation of the new government. In the previous period, we have faced serious challenges that we had to handle. However, we also had to continue the projects driving the economy in the country in general. And in this regard, I wish to underline that we coped with the effects of the COVID pandemic. Now we have the energy crisis, all the consequences we are suffering on the soil of Europe from the war. So generally, construction branch is moving through interline coordination, interagency coordination. We managed to have all the projects continuing, roads to be built, sewerage and water pipelines to be implemented and constructed, and move by achieving progress as we expect in these hard times. I wish to underline that in the area of highway infrastructure and network we have in the country currently, 59 kilometers are under construction of highway roads, but more than 140 kilometers of highway road network will be constructed in the coming period, which is extremely important for infrastructure and economic activities, and also all the leg-back processes in the section of Kičevo-Ohrid that is being constructed at a higher pace to overcome all the effects we actually faced when we took power. And the highway is being built at an acceptable pace. The other section is Skopje-Blace. The first phase is underway, and regarding the second phase, information in government was adopted, and a tender procedure should be open regarding Skopje-Blace section, which is very important to connect the country with Kosovo. Then the sections of Corridor 8 and Corridor 10D, as the first Deputy Prime Minister has mentioned, is already in the public enterprise of state roads, is under the consultant is being selected, and international agreements will be started. Ќафасен со Струга and Trebinošte from Bukojčani to Gostivar and Gostivar-Tetovo sections, and also the section of Corridor 10D, Prilep-Bitola, will be also put under construction. That is going to be an impetus for the development of infrastructure in the coming period. What I wanted to mention after the completion of this 100 days is the express road completion, which is the first project completed with 64 million euro, 40 kilometers of express section, thus annulling a high number of black points in this part. We connected the east and southeast parts, and very soon we'll present that on the ground in terms of this very important express road. And the second section of the express road, Štip-Kočani, which is the section Krupište-Kočani, is under construction, and certainly the road that has been discussed for 20 years now, which is the express road from Gradsko, connection from Corridor 10D towards Prilep, and it is being built in two phases, Gradsko to Drenovo, very powerful mechanical, also the slopes and breaking of tunnels and construction of bridges, which is very important for Pelagonia and Prilep region. We started the rehabilitation of Pletvar section for supporting the citizens transiting in this part of the country, and we are continuing with the highway solutions for Prilep-Bitola. So the express road from Kriva Palanka to Rankovce is also a very important section, thus avoiding a very difficult route in the northeast part of the country, Corridor 8 in the eastern part, and on the road from Kriva Palanka to the Bulgarian office and Devebair. So machinery is everywhere. We are expecting a strong construction season in the coming period that will continue in the coming period as well in numbers. All of these sections mean 59 kilometers of highway roads, preparing for 140 new kilometers of highway roads. 118 kilometers of express roads are under construction. 54 kilometers are before their completion, and we should continue the others. Then 200 kilometers of regional roads are under construction, renovation and reconstruction, and 70 more are in the phase of evaluation, and 80 kilometers of local roads within municipalities themselves to improve the quality of citizens' lives and help municipalities. So these are 80 kilometers within the municipalities across 40 municipalities in the country. Also, I wish to mention the railroad infrastructure in Corridor 8, in the eastern section. In the latest history of independent Macedonia, this is the largest infrastructural project in the area of railroad infrastructure, to be started this year with an investment of 200 million euro, the first and second phase of Corridor 8, Kumanovo-Beljakovce and Beljakovce-Kriva Palanka. So serious year is ahead of us, this 2022 and the next year in the area of infrastructural projects. So we are expecting that economy, construction will become actually the engine of economy in the coming period. We continue with the construction of roads and road infrastructure, and specifically the section from Skopje to Miladinovci, which is part of Corridor 8 from Kumanovo, Skopje's Kumanovo section, which is in its final design and tender procedure of a 4.5 million euro investment, thus improving the quality of this section from Skopje to Kumanovo. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Minister, for your responses in the area of capital investment in road infrastructure. The next question is to the Minister of Environment and Physical Planning, Mr. Nasser Nureddini. Does environmental protection and improving quality of citizens' lives is top priority? What are the priorities of the Ministry of Environment and Physical Planning to secure these priorities? And at the same time, what is the strategy to protect the environment? Do we have a plan and implementation of capital projects that will benefit our citizens? You may take the floor. Thank you for the question. Dear colleagues, I'll move in Albanian. I think that we are coming to the end of this session. So the environment is not a priority for this government, but it's a top priority, the top 3 priorities. All the previous colleagues mentioned investment in the green agenda and the renewable energy sources, environment protection, and within these 100 days there is a need for a long-term strategy, and I've been lucky to continue with the same ministry as previously, so the strategies are being implemented further. The first results you've seen is the purification plant of office, and we actually cleaned Linden, and this will continue by the end of the year. We continue with the inspection law related to the environment. So the hotspots are identified under this law, but in the future we are prepared for new laws and modifications there too. The law on water, the law on climate change, the law on industrial mission, and a new law on nature protection. The goal of our laws is to protect the protected areas in the long run, providing opportunities for our citizens to maintain sustainable economy. When I speak about capital investment, I'm talking about the budget, also the riverbeds, investment in water supply pipelines, regulation of wastewater, and key investments will take place with the international the World Bank and the international, the EBRD, and we will set up a plant for treatment of wastewaters in Skopje, a large one, then in Tetovo, and we have another strategy for waste treatment, where we will sign an agreement with EBRD, where we will invest in the basic infrastructure in our country to resolve the waste issue in the long run under the project in August that was adopted in August 2021. I can provide some more information, but it will take us a lot of time. Thank you very much. And the last question in this third session of our today's forum is addressed to the Vice Deputy Minister of the Information Society and Administration, Mr. Alexander Baidevsky. Digitalization are high on the list of priorities of this government. What are the achievements in this area, and when can citizens expect the full digitalization of services and abandonment of counter work?
Thank you very much for the questions. First of all, allow me to greet the attendees. When it comes to the professionalization and departization of administration, we are continually working on this issue. This is a topic that was current in the past and shall continue in the future too. We will undertake measures and activities to continually improve the work in the public administration. I'd like to emphasize that during the past period, we have actively worked on the laws that regulate the work of the public administration, the law on administrative employees, and the law regulating the senior management of the. We are working also on various proposals, which will mean that in the future we will be improve the productivity and efficiency of the employees in the sector. We will also continue cooperation in preventing the corruption. We have undertaken certain measures in the legal provisions in terms of fighting against the corruption. What I'm trying to say, it is also important about the law on the higher management, which is very important about the professionalization and departization of the head of sections within the respective units. We would like to harmonize these conditions through which we will increase the transparency and the visibility of the entire procedures. As well, we're anticipating to receive a professional individuals who will be running the affairs of a public administration and to depart from the political influences, and by this we will contribute to a greater level of a departization of the public services. And at a certain point of time, this will spill over and will be implemented within the entire public sector. In terms of a digitalization, this retains the high priority, not only of our ministry, but also it is a priority of the entire government. We have done a great deal of work in terms of a digitalization. We have adopted certain number of laws, and we can say that there are, by adopting these laws, we have laid the foundations for further digitalizations. We have established the system of electronic services and the central registry of the population, through which we will develop these further services that will be provided to the citizens. The system for electronic services, there were about 20,000 services provided, and we have about 7,000 users, and we intend to develop the services in the future. We will develop further 135 additional electronic services. We're also motivating and encouraging the other institutions to go ahead with the digitalizations. This would mean that the recipients, the citizens, will get a more efficient and faster services. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much. This was the last question from the third session of today's forum.
And by this, we close this forum, which was held today. Thank you very much for your attention. Goodbye to all, and thank you very much for your attention. Bye.